and welcome back to Hill House Vintage. I'm so glad you could join me. Now, I've often been asked whether I'll ever do a full house tour at Hill House, and the answer to that is probably not a full house tour, but what I do like to do is I do like to show individual spaces and individual rooms to show you how I got to that aesthetic and what my style is and how I create my style. And I'm going to start off today with a tour of my vintage gym. Now, the truth be told, it's not strictly a vintage gym. With a vintage gym, you probably don't have modern appliances with plugs. And I do have my exercise bike and my exercise machines that do require modern things like electricity. So I like to call it a vintage gym because it's vintage inspired. So there's lots of brown wood, there's lots of leather, brown leather. And I just think that just gives a more aesthetically pleasing view of a gym that would otherwise be very full of hard metals and hard looking things. Like many people, the idea for having a home gym was spurred on by lockdown, where we were all stuck in our homes and our environments, and some of us had gym memberships that we couldn't use or gym memberships that expired. Now, I'm one of those people, I have to admit, that I've always had gym memberships, and I'll have huge chunks of time where I don't go because you don't always want to leave your home. So having a home bicycle or a home space where you can actually exercise, which is obviously very healthy and very good for you, made complete sense. And having 3 grown-up children who are currently away at university, but when they were home, they wanted to exercise too. So we had an old garage that was unused. And I'd been looking at this garage for years, almost a decade, thinking, what can we do with it? It was a junk tip. It was always filled with the wooden furniture that I wanted to paint or upcycle and recycle. But it was becoming something that we just put our junk in. And I do believe that if you have a space for junk, you will accumulate junk and you will create more junk. And so I wanted to put it to good use, and a vintage gym seemed to be the most logical thing, or a home gym seemed to be the most logical thing. The vintage idea came because that's my style and that's my aesthetic. And I truly believe that if a space is beautiful, it will draw you in and make you use it more. So really, the vintage side is just to make sure that I use it. So as you'll see, it started off as an old garage with old wooden doors that were crumbling and falling apart, and concrete flooring and just concrete walls. It wasn't a very attractive space, low ceiling. It was just a very average garage. And together with our handyman, who helped do other bits around the garden. In fact, I was his second mate when we built my home office, so we built it together. And so we came up with a decision that we would put tongue and groove on the walls in order to clad the walls and make them and line them so that they were waterproof. And then we had wooden flooring, so we screed the floor and made it straight because there was a slope. And then it was all about sort of cladding all the walls and making it as straight lined as possible and fit for a gym. And then the idea was, after that, to paint everything white. The space itself has a very small window, and I wanted to get as much light in as possible. Eventually we will have new doors, replace the doors, and have glass windows in those doors so that there's more light let in. But in the meantime, I wanted it all painted white so that it felt really bright and open. We opened up the roof to give more space and to give a feeling, a sense of light and air as well. Another one of my favourite elements in the gym is this wonderful and amazing, very heavy factory window. Now, it comes from a company that refurbishes and creates these wonderful glass mirrors out of factory windows. So the window is actually an original window from a very old factory in England. I think actually some of them came from France as well. And yes, they put these foxed pieces of glass within it, and I think it's a wonderful thing. You do need to see yourself when you're in the gym, but I don't think you need to see yourself too clearly. So I quite like the fact that I can see what's going on, but I don't need to see specifics. One thing that I really wanted to do is I wanted to make it form and function as well as beautiful. So there are some modern things in there. And as you all know, I'm a massive fan of my music, and I love my vintage jazz and I love my classical music. But I like contemporary tastes. I love my contemporary music. And the thing about music is that it has to be clear and loud when I'm listening to it, especially when I'm in the gym, when you want to be motivated and you want to be motivated to do that exercise in the first place. And I find that it's really enhanced by having a really good sound system and good music. So just so you know, within this video is an integrated paid-for partnership with Sonos. I chose the Sonos One speaker because it's a smart speaker for music lovers. Its compact design delivers surprisingly rich sound and comes with true play tuning, which is cleverly optimizing the sound of your speaker wherever it's placed. The Sonos One also has voice control, and you can add either Sonos Voice, Amazon Alexa, or Google Assistant, which is great if you're in the middle of a workout and quickly want to alter the volume or change the music. As a music lover, my aesthetic and my music preference may be vintage, but with Sonos, my sound quality is as modern and up-to-date as possible. If you'd like to find out more about the Sonos One smart speaker, I'll leave a link in the box below for more information. So with regards to styling and the accessories I use, the way I make it vintage and the way I make everything in my home have that vintage air is a mixture. It's a mixture of modern things and it's a mixture of vintage items. And so the accessories are incredibly important when you're styling in this sort of way. And here's something that I haven't actually had a chance to put up yet, but they are original vintage rowing boat oars. And I think they'll look lovely sort of against a wall, maybe sort of, I don't know, hooked up or something. And things like that change a sort of very plain space into something quite interesting and just a pleasure to be in and to work out in. Now, working out is not my favourite thing, so anything I can do to enhance the space is a good thing. But let's have a little look around. Welcome to my vintage gym. Now this is styled a little bit for you. So normally it's all of the equipment and the boxing medicine ball and the rugby ball will be in the corner. But this is just to give you an idea of how it looks and the sort of accessories I've looked to make it look like a vintage gym. Now this is the very big factory mirror that I was talking about. It was originally a factory window. So the mirror has been placed in by the designers who created it, and I think it's really wonderful. I wanted it to have an industrial feel to it, so it should be light and airy, but also with elements of sort of industrial metals as well, so that it gave that air of a vintage gym, and perhaps a gym that was created and used over the last several decades, if not a century. So this includes the actual lighting fixtures, which are all in brass, and I wanted them to have that industrial feel too. So you'll find that they're not there for their prettiness, they're there because they look really like strong and useful, and I think they're beautiful in their own way. So here are the oars that will find their home in here, and the way I would style this is perhaps that they would be up sort of opposite each other on the wall like this, and I think things like that just adds a little bit of interest. You know, you won't necessarily use them in here, but the fact is that they're vintage, they're original rowing oars from the 1920s and 30s, and that makes it very much in keeping with how I wanted it to look in here. So this is our blackboard, and this blackboard has been in the family, and I've used it for almost 2 decades, because it used to be in one of my children's rooms when they were little, and they would scribble all over it, and they learned to sort of like do their ABCs and things on it. Then it moved to the family room and became the source of all important information. It had important emergency numbers, it had the school term times and the school dates, so that we would all just know at a glance when we were finishing school, or people's birthdays, for instance. And then there came a time when there was no use for it. We didn't need it. And I really wanted to keep it. It has sentimental value. But I also felt that it was quite in keeping with the retro vibe of the home gym. So it just seemed quite logical to move it into this room and to have it as something that gave the same flavour of a 1940s, 1950s school gym, but also we can keep score on it. You know, if we're having competitions in here or something, or if we're wanting to do a rota for who's using the gym when, we can actually do all that on here with the chalkboard, which I think is quite lovely. And the fact that we've used it for many years is extra special. Okay. So as I've mentioned before, what makes it a vintage or retro gym? It's all going to be in the accessories, because of course a lot of the equipment is modern and is not vintage at all. So it's all in the styling and in the look to make it have that retro vintage feel. And things like this sort of add to it. I don't use the boxing gloves. I don't think anyone in my family uses the boxing gloves, but it's just a lovely vintage element of having original leather boxing gloves with the lace up. I think that looks really cute. Maybe one day somebody will use them. And then there are things like this, which we've got the vintage leather lace up punch bag, which once again, one day I will put this up, but at the moment it's more of a styling accessory. And then of course the vintage rugby ball, which the children do occasionally throw at each other when they're playing in the garden, although they're not so little anymore. And one of my favourite things is that I have a 1920s golfing locker, pure vintage, and it's wonderful, quite narrow. It fits into the space quite beautifully and was sourced for me by a friend. And inside of that, I have all of the towels and some of the weights and a lot of exercise books and all of the things that you want to keep tucked away. And so that's worked beautifully, and so wonderful that it's actually an original golfing locker as well. Well, I hope you enjoyed that little mini tour of my vintage gym. It's an ever-evolving space, as all spaces are. There are always things that will be layered and taken away and put in, and it is about function. So of course we will sort of experience over time that things that do work and things that don't work, and maybe there'll be space issues and things will be moved around. But that's the beauty of designing and creating spaces for us to live in. They are meant to be beautiful, but they're also meant to be very useful. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you'll come back and see me again soon. Thank you for watching.